All right, so I'm Dmitry Barinov. I'm CTO of SecureKey. I'm here to talk about work that we have been doing in the last year right now about trying to work on various interoperability technologies and where we are, what we are planning to do, why this is, we believe, why this is good for the communities involved. And it's really to talk about how we are working on both Fabric and Aries, and how we believe that this will enhance abilities of the organizations participating in Hyperledger projects to interoperate with each other while running on different platforms, and also interoperate with companies that are also implementing W3C compliant standards. So that's the goal. So about us. SecureKeys, we are based in Toronto, Canada. We provide identity and data exchange networks. We have been in this business for a few years now. Last year, we launched the Verified Me network, which is basically identity proofing network, which is anchored by Canadian financial institutions. We're growing it organically as all our other projects. We have more than 100,000 active users right now. You can download an app and see how, but if you don't have an account without, outside of the major Canadian banks right now, you will not be able to use it. So the network provides a number of the unique features, right? Well, unique at least as far as I know. It basically provides the privacy-enhanced data exchange, provides consent management with triple-blind privacy, where we're hiding data providers from data consumers, provides auditable transactions and billing, so we can actually charge data consumers for the data they receive and reimburse data providers. Interesting things. And we built it on Fabric. We started building it 4 years ago. As many of you know here, it takes years to build an enterprise-grade network, which you actually can integrate with enterprise-grade institutions, right? So for sure, the pure technical work of building the network was a very small piece compared to the integration efforts and many other efforts that we have done. Then many of you know that since in the last 4 years, there are a number of standards emerged that basically started to define the integrations between various organizations that issue identities and that are working in the identity business, right? And obviously, we can apply these standards to the identities, but generically, we can apply them to the data exchanges per se, right? Because your identity, there could be identity of an element, identity of some material piece as well. So these standards are decentralized identifiers and verifiable credentials. Both are being defined, and they're in various readiness states at W3C. We also were very intrigued by the diff side tree protocol and the diff DITCOM protocols. And some of them, I believe, just recently became governed by diff. And if you don't know what diff is, right, it's like I'll actually run into the bad situation when I forget which abbreviation means, but it's Distributed Identity Foundation. I believe that's what it stands for. Basically, obviously, interoperable standards offer very exciting capabilities. Not only they build a better community and ability for various vendors to products to talk to each other, they also allow the market to grow quite nicely, because many organizations do not feel now that they are in a complete vendor lock situation, right? Like, oh, we will do your identity, right? And it will not talk to another identity, and who is right, who is wrong. not having the standards hampers early adopters quite heavily, right? It takes a while for us to talk, and it takes everyone to convince that what we are doing with them, I mean the commercial partners, is actually the right thing to do. Obviously, same with the governments, right? Some governments, even if early adopters, right, there is always this mistake of doing something wrong. So our goal was basically to improve the network and support standards based on interoperability. That was very, very important. But also, we wanted to ensure that we leverage the Hyperledger community because we learned to appreciate it and learned to appreciate the feedback and actually inputs from the Hyperledger community. So what we basically decided to somehow take the code that it's basically a chain code, which presented verified me, that was running on top of the Hyperledger Fabric, and try to see how we can make that code to integrate with others over the DID and verifiable credential standards. Which is, as I said, are still being defined, right? But many, many concepts are quite well established right now. So we want to enable verifiable credentials across all our systems. We want to use the DIDCOM from Aries to enable end-to-end protected data communications. We also, and the deck, I think the deck talks about it a little bit later, but we're also enabling a CHAPI protocol, if you are familiar with the CHAPI protocol, to enable the data exchanges. And we are supplying the wallet functionality for the user to basically manage the data flows, manage consents, manage their credentials, and so on and so forth. So, and once again, in the current wallet that we have, right, like how do we add that in the current wallet called Verified Me, how do we add these credentials? So what we decided to do, we started to participate in proposing changes to Fabric, and on the other side, we started to work with Aries community, working on some changes to Aries, and that's what I will try to describe now. So we'll start with Fabric, just because it's the next slide. So on Fabric, we started the project called TrustBlock. That's the link on the GitHub to the TrustBlock. I believe trustblock.io has some description page there as well. And basically what we decided to do, we decided to extend Fabric to support DIDs. That's the gist of it, right? Because Fabric right now doesn't. And the whole point of the project TrustBlock is enable DIDs on Fabric. We also wanted to enable peer to expose diff site tree, right? Because site tree is a very important component that helps us to manage DID communications. And we want to obviously to expose consortium membership to enable discovery of DIDs, right? Validation of DID results, and so on and so forth. And we're also supplying, on the DID methods, right, it's interesting, there are lots of discussions in the community happening, right? Who should be defining DID methods? Should they be like completely diversified, or should some communities or consortiums adopt their own DID methods, right? So we're obviously defining the DID method for the commercial consortium that we have, right? And trying to understand how we will work with DID methods that are defined by other organizations. All right, Aries. So Aries, as you know, supplies framework for verifiable data and DID communication. Great project, right? I'm sure in the room there are a few people who know Aries 1,000 times more than I am. But basically what we're doing, we are trying to lead the development of the Go framework, and that's a GitHub link to the Aries Go framework, which basically, so the Fabric, for those of you who don't know, is written in Go, right? So it's very important, like how you connect to that. Well, we decided to create the Go framework on Aries, all right? So it enables, obviously, Golang, REST, JavaScript, WebAssembly API bindings, supplies DID-COM routing. Yeah, so that's what it does, right? And most of that is described. So the Trust Block project that we have, it basically links the generic Fabric and generic Aries, right? In short term. And Trust Block is obviously completely open source, right? And stuff. So that's what we have done. What we plan to do with that, so the current network that we are running in Canada, the current version of the network that we are running in Canada is not using DIDs or verifiable credentials. The next version will. Obviously the networks that we are building in other markets will as well. Upgrading, and once again, this is mostly associated with the fact that upgrading the enterprise network, where lots of organizations are involved and integrated, and might require an explanation why we're doing this and what the change is, right? It takes time, unfortunately, just from a regulatory and governance perspective. So this diagram is, if you cannot see it, and it's on the Trust Block page as well. But it kind of describes at the fairly high level the components that we are building and the components that and how we're linking things together. Obviously it has some relevance to our current, to the way how our current network is operated and built in Verified Me. But the goal is to ensure that Fabric basically supports interoperable verifiable specs governed by any consortium. So we're still using Fabric in the end. The Go Aries framework is compatible with Fabric, right? We are creating a number of the use cases and demonstrations that would leverage this in the current consortium content, where basically we are solving the KYC use cases for financial institutions and other organizations. And in government use cases, where the governments can issue the verifiable credentials based on the physical documents that they issue. There are a number of the insurance cases as well that are fairly interesting. So we will be doing a few demos in the spring IW, which is at the end of April. There will be some interop. We plan to interop with a few networks, some of these networks that are basically not Hyperledger networks. So I will not mention those names, but these are the networks that are being right now piloted by US federal government. And so we will do that. And because, and the power of that is that this allows us to obviously integrate with indie projects. It allows us to integrate with sovereign projects. It allows us to integrate with other projects that, that are compliant with W3C standards. So that's pretty much it. And there is much more to talk about it. Like I always, like it's kind of hard to squeeze this stuff. But please, if I can, I will answer.
Yeah, I think my main question is, you are talking about integration with Indian sovereign projects. Are you going to bring the ability to work with JWT credentials to sovereign and Indian networks, or are you going to support the CL credentials in Fabric?
Yeah, so we definitely would like to do both, right? But probably extension of Fabric will be a second project for us, right? We would rather use the credentials and put them into the areas, but we'll see. Like it's actually a good enough question that I'm not sure that we have. So and you know, to that point, right now we do not have a pilot project for the interop with anybody on Indie or sovereign, which we will, right, eventually. It just, and you know, well, at least some of you, the gentleman who sits right next to you, he knows the people who are actually working on our Aries Fabric integration. Our focus is very simple, right? Finish the Go SDK, which is more or less done, right? We published it, we released it a week ago or something like that. Yeah, and try to do the small interop with Veriswan. Veriswan. Yeah, it's Digital Bazaar guys. Yeah, and then we'll probably identify the project on India or Sovereign that we will work with. Like I keep thinking that we should do something just because of Canada. We will try to do something with CU ledger or with BC. But quite honestly, we did not discuss this, right? So I don't know what's the best way.
So it's just to be discussed.
Yeah. It's really like all of that. Like even, the data here is one we called.
Yeah, because just CL and JWT is the main concern right now for this trial. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I was really excited to hear about the Trust Block project. I've never seen that before. Super cool. So today it supports peer DIDs, or it supports the DID communication.
Correct. So it's, well, supports is a bad maybe. Like the intent, the intent is for it to support the DIDCOM. Absolutely. We do have to support CHAPI. For many reasons. One of that, it's basically it's an interop, but we do not intend to introduce the anything number 3 there.
Do you intend to get to support verifiable credentials or just stop at DIDCOM?
No, we'll do verifiable credentials, of course. Yeah, and that probably will be first DIDCOM, then VCs, but we'll see how it goes.
And I should say publicly, your team's been a lot of fun to work with.
Thank you. Thank you. I was trying to convince everybody to come here, but they said, "Oh, I'm busy." Yeah. All right then. Thank you.